Bilderberg. Shh. It's meant to be a secret. When you hear the name Bilderberg, visions of blacked out limos with nebulous silhouettes of luminaries like David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Hillary Clinton might come to mind. But despite the ultra-high profile of the guests, 95% of the global major media outlets have never ever mentioned its name. Tonight, we're going to find out how and why, and who are the major players in this shadowy cabal as we go on the edge. Bilderberg, who are they? What are they? And how have they become able to rule the global social political scene without any public scrutiny, totally under the radar for so long? And what have they got planned for us serfs and vassals in 2012? To help us navigate these questions and to get some answers, we're joined by a very special guest this evening. Among other things, he's on the writing team of Channel 4's 10 O'Clock Live and 8 out of 10 Cats, but he's also a journalist. He's one of the only journalists who has covered the Bilderberg meeting for The Guardian over the last 3 years. Let's welcome Charlie Skelton. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Patrick. Hello.
So, let's get right down to it.
Yeah.
Bilderberg, what is it? And who are its members? What's the history of it?
Well, that's a very big question. Fortunately, we've got a bit of time. It's an enormous thing that doesn't get written about. That's one thing. It's a huge security operation that occurs once a year. But in practical terms, it's a group of people, a small group of people, called the Bilderberg Steering Committee, that enlarges once a year to incorporate maybe 130, 140 people. And they go and sit in an exclusive, heavily guarded hotel somewhere in the world, behind a big police cordon with helicopters flying over, and they spend 3 days having a conference, and it's a proper conference. You know, they have their lanyards, they have their table outside where they pick them up, and they have
delegate badges.
Their delegate badges, and it's you know, they've got a schedule and they keep to it. You can see them coming out for a cigarette every so often, if you've got a long lens, and so it's often written off as a talking shop by some people that would like to diminish its importance, but its actual importance can simply be divined from the list of people that attend, and there are now they admit attend, and it's an extraordinary who's who of the power players in international finance, industry, in intelligence, and media ownership, and with a little sprinkling of European royalty, for good measure.
This isn't just any ordinary summit, and also that's one I want you to explain to our viewers. This isn't any ordinary meeting. You know, like the G8 or the G20, you have the heads of state there, and you have the public faces of public policy. This is something very different, just by the nature of the attendees and the way who's on this list. This isn't just people from one industry. Yeah. These are the major media moguls. These are the political movers and shakers, the future presidents of America, vice presidential candidates, key people in key positions.
Yeah. There's a little habit they have of managing to invite people to Bilderberg the year before they take high office. You know, for example, David Cameron.
Yep. Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. You know,
and I heard a story that you know, they always invite the prospective U.S. president to Bilderberg the year or the 2 years before he might be running for his party's nomination. And basically, when Bill Clinton was there in 1991 or 1990, they make them open doors and you know, bring the water to the table, almost like you know, these are your new bosses,
Yeah.
and this is Mr. Clinton or Mr. Obama.
There's a really interesting quote actually from Clinton, which you can look up, which is he's talking about the fact his campaign manager, and I just can't remember the name. There's too many names.
James Carville?
Possibly invited him, sort of took him along to Bilderberg and said, you know, here's the new guy, you know, kind of thing. And Clinton says it was at that point he kind of realised he'd gone up a level, and he was suddenly, you know, the kind of hand of the lottery had come down and gone, it could be you. And so yes, so
Tony Blair was at Bilderberg?
yeah, and he's lied. He's lied to Parliament about going, which is quite serious.
When was he there?
I can't remember.
But
There's too many facts.
Before he was PM?
I think it's the year before.
Before he became PM. Okay.
Yeah.
Because in America, the Logan Act forbids public servants from, you know, non-state meetings with foreign entities. Elected officials they're forbidden by U.S. law.
Your James Steinberg, Deputy Secretary of State, was there last year. He's on the list, and he was meeting in private with the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, who was there. Contrary to what they say, they Bilderberg, in whatever small amount of literature they have, their website, Bilderberg Meetings, they always stress, you know, that people are here in their private capacity. They're here as private individuals. It's very much sort of Chatham House rules. We're just having a little chit-chat. However, I last year rang the Treasury whilst I was there in St. Moritz and said, can you, because we had a photo, someone managed to get a photo of George Osborne coming through in his limo, and I said, can you confirm whether George Osborne, the Chancellor, is here, and if so, in what capacity is he attending this summit? And I spent a whole day practically on the phone to the Treasury, eventually being bumped around, and they came back with a response, which was, yes, he's here in an official capacity, which is an extraordinary thing.
George Osborne was in St. Moritz last year.
In his official capacity as Chancellor of the Exchequer for 3 days, one of his biggest, you know, you look at the Chancellor of the Exchequer's diary.
A totally secret meeting.
That's a big chunk.
Totally private meeting.
Yeah.
Secret with the heads of captains of industry, the heads of state, or former heads of state. George Osborne's there.
Yeah. And when people
talking about what?
Well, you know, not making policy, as they insist upon, not making any decisions, etc., etc. But when people say, you know, why are you at all bothered by this event? You know, why can't they just go and have a private chat? Well, precisely because my elected Chancellor of the Exchequer is there with a Treasury official for 3 days as Chancellor of the Exchequer, with the head of Deutsche Bank, the head of Barclays, the head of HSBC, the head of Airbus, the head of Daimler, you know, etc., 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 the head of the NSA, and reporting back not a single sentence about what he did there. Nothing. So that's just deeply inappropriate. And what I have found in my small number of years of going along and just sort of turning up and seeing what's going on is it's a constant mind problem. I was going to say a rude word then. But you get there and I don't know if you know the phrase cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
And you're going, hang on, I've just seen, there's helicopters above me, there's armed police, there's more limousines than I've ever seen in my life. There's a, you know, depending where you are, there's a, you know, a navy boat off the shore. And you turn around and there's no, you look around and you think, where's the press?
Yeah.
And you go, well, I don't understand. And I actually took 2 colleagues of mine who work on dispatches, Channel 4 dispatches, and they're proper journalists, not unlike me. I'm just a hobbyist, but they're proper journalists, and they work in current affairs, and that was their response. They were sort of going, this is a bit odd. Well, I don't understand where the press are.
Look at Image 106. If we get that on the screen, you know, the mainstream media before 2010. I saw a few mentions of it in the Washington Post. They blurbed it in the New York Times last year. Yeah. But before 2010, 0. So explain about that image. Reuters, or you did a search for Bilderberg?
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole Reuters news service and all its archives, how many results did we get?
Yeah, 0.
0.
So at the end, that's another part of that. You're there, you think, well, presumably there's some kind of, this is scratched its way into the kind of mainstream news consciousness somehow. But, you know, AP and Reuters, that people think of as this kind of crystal clear, you know, outpouring of pure news, don't mention it. And you sort of go, oh, that's a bit weird. I don't really understand that. And
my mother's 70, right?
Yeah.
And she didn't know about Bilderberg until 2 weeks ago when I mentioned it to her. And she was active politically her whole life.
Yeah.
At some time in Washington as well, when we were very young. I said she was just flabbergasted.
Yeah.
She's like, what? Who?
Yeah.
Bilderberg? Who are they? She heard Alex Jones talking about it on the radio, and she's like, what is this Bilderberg? And, you know, she's been alive since 1942.
Okay, well, I spoke to someone, I mean, over and over again this happens. I spoke to the head of a reasonably big TV production company in the UK, he will remain nameless. I was explaining to him that I was off to the Bilderberg conference, and we had this chat, and he couldn't really understand what I was talking about, because he thought it was the Bilderberg conference, and it was some conference about the toy Bilderbears, and he'd never heard of Bilderberg. And, you know, I spoke to someone, I rang up the ITV forward planning of their news, and I said, are you interested in covering the Bilderberg conference? And they went, you know, the Bilderberg conference, that rings a bell. And it's when you hear things like that, you go, it's not, as much as there's a conspiracy to keep a lid on this story, the lid's been kept on so well, there's now a kind of conspiracy of ignorance, where people just don't know. They just don't know about this thing. And I mean, I was talking to you before the show about, I work on the show 8 out of 10 Cats, and the host of it, Jimmy Carr, the comedian, he said, last year it was on when I was there in St. Moritz, and he said, well, look, this big conference is on, why don't we do a joke about it? Let's do a joke about it on the show. And I went, this is great, let's do that. Sat down to write a joke about it, and I suddenly realized in order to write a joke about it, you had to explain, it would have had the biggest setup in joke history in order to explain to people what the punchline meant. So, you know, that you can't even write a joke about it, because it's not one of those things that you go, all right, it's that. Although, hopefully that's changing.
So you got an interesting story. Just tell us your background. I think you've been in comedy.
Yeah.
And you've been a writer.
Yeah.
And how did you get involved in Bilderberg? Tell us the story from the beginning, because it's a very interesting story. You're going into virgin territory as far as the media is concerned.
Well, I suppose I have two people to blame. My wife, for slightly nudging me in the direction of more interesting and perhaps skeptical news analysis, and also President Obama. And I remember it was the night of the election, of his inaugural, what would you call it? Not the inaugural, when he'd won the election and he gave his address to the, you know, where everyone's crying with joy at this guy. And I was with him at that point. I was full on Obama, thank God Obama.
A lot of people were.
Yeah, I was there, and I lost it on that night. And he gave a speech that was so hollow that he managed to destroy my faith in politics, in mainstream politics, right there with his speech, with his acceptance speech, and it was so bad and so empty and so not like a normal human being talking.
Michelle and I are going to change the country, and we're going to fix all that.
Yeah. So I just went, oh God, what have I just been... I was sending emails to David Axelrod, the head of his campaign, going, look, I don't know if you need any jokes.
He's Obama's brain, by the way.
Yeah, right.
David Axelrod,
yeah.
That's Obama's official brain.
So anyway, I fell out of love with that. A few months later, I just was, you know, I'd come across the Bilderberg conference a little bit, and I just thought to myself, it's odd that the mainstream news don't cover it. And then I thought, hang on. I remember walking along the road and going, why don't I just do it? Why don't I just see whether I could manage to do it? And I just contacted someone I know at The Guardian and said, look, I don't know if you want this thing. I'll go and do a silly thing. I'll just turn up at this place, see what happens. You know,
where was it?
That was in just outside Athens.
In Greece, okay.
Yeah. And they said, yeah, it might be funny. Yeah, what's this thing? This builder what? So I went, yeah, okay, let's do that. And I went off, and I was...
The greatest minds at The Guardian had no idea.
Well, I had no idea. No, exactly. And this was from fairly high. No one really...
Jonathan Steele had no idea.
Yeah, but no one had... But
Freeland had no idea.
But in the defence, there wasn't really any reference to where it was. And I remember finding a little reference in a kind of internet forum going, we think it's in Vouliagmeni outside Athens. And I sort of went, okay, well, this is worth a punt. Took myself off to Athens and... thinking, oh, this will be funny, see what happens. And then I entered a dystopian nightmare that practically gave me a nervous breakdown.
Let's share some images from your first trip to Bilderberg. 111. Let's cue up image 111. And I think, tell us what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, that image is exactly where my life changed in terms of Bilderberg, in terms of my relationship to
what's going on there?
Authority. That's outside the hotel. That's some Greek police. And I stupidly took a photo of them. And from that point, I was just arrested, re-arrested, arrested, followed, harassed.
They threw you in jail? Or
endlessly.
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 Just threw you in and you got out? And
just turned down to the police station. It became, at one point, I took a photograph of a limousine's wheels as it went past, literally like this, with a little tiny digital camera like that. Next thing you know, like Starsky and Hutch, they come up. You know, cars, motorbikes, I'm off down the police station again.
Let's look at 112. Tell us a little bit about this guy, and we'll look at that after the break. But yeah, we're going to go into some of the veteran alternative media that's covered Bilderberg and talk a bit more about your first experiences in Greece after the break.
Will do.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine. On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm here with my guest, Charlie Skelton, and we are talking about Bilderberg. And Charlie, I got a few texts from our viewers out there, and one of them asks, are there any other foreign journalists that you've run into at the Bilderberg meetings? And one person who I know comes to mind is Mr. Jim Tucker. So you cue 112, and there's a good photo of Jim. Tell us a little bit about Jim, how you met him.
Yeah, well, that's just after I met him. I took that photo myself, and I just turned up here in this little seaside town outside Athens in 2009, and I wasn't sure whether, I genuinely had no idea whether I was in the right place or whether there was any kind of a conference was going on. And then this figure just walked down the road wearing this big hat, and I thought, hang on, I think I've seen this guy before.
With a cigarette.
Yeah, I think I might be in the right place.
Yeah.
And that was Jim Tucker, who's been kind of Bilderbothering for decades now.
30, 40 years?
Goodness knows, yeah.
So he's got a source inside Bilderberg. And of course, a lot of people are familiar with Alex Jones has covered Bilderberg judiciously for the last 4 or 5 years. And so Alex works off of Jim Tucker's source.
Yeah.
And so Jim leaks to Alex what the agendas are going to be and so forth. I think that's pretty extraordinary that Jim Tucker's managed to preserve a source inside Bilderberg for 30 years.
Yeah, remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's incredible.
Then again, you know, I might start saying I've got a source in Bilderberg and just start going, yeah, I think here's her agenda.
Yeah.
Because who's going to say no? No, it isn't. But anyway, no, but I'm sure he does. And yeah, he's an indomitable fellow. And there's some other people that have been kind of covering it for a few years and for longer than a few years. And there's a Swiss guy, Manfred, from he's got a website which it's called All Smoke and Mirrors in German, Alles Schall und Rauch, or whatever you say, and I can't speak German, so I apologise to the German language what I just said. Daniel
Estelin.
Daniel Estelin, yeah.
Did you meet Daniel?
Kind of, yeah.
Because he wrote the book Bilderberg, and that was kind of most people's first segue.
Yes, and you know, it's a pretty good. I would recommend the book. I'd have a little pinch of salt around some of the things that he says about himself.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's the information, the photographs, it's all good.
Yeah.
And the documents he's got, it's all good. And so if you were going to start somewhere,
we're not plugging anyone.
Well, I'll plug it. You know what? Do you know what? I would plug it.
But as a reference.
But he, yeah, I met him last year. Well, I say I met him. No, it was in Citrus in 2010, where he decided to out me as an MI6 agent.
Well, you know,
in front of my wife.
It happens to the best of us, Charlie.
My wife took him to task.
I've been outed as a I've been accused of being MI6, MI5, CIA, and I get these emails from people, and I email them back and say I really wish I had the second paycheck. To be quite honest, I could afford to buy a nice car or something. But
unless they've done such a good mind control job of me that I just don't even know.
Yeah, you're a sleeper.
Yeah, the phone rings and I just. Yeah.
So I got another text from one of our viewers. Edge text is saying, Ed Miliband is likely to be the next British Prime Minister. And have you seen him or known of his attendance at any Bilderberg meetings?
I'm going to betray my ignorance and pass on this one. I can't remember. Goodness. I mean, well, perhaps some of our viewers could Google that.
I believe David has attended. David Miliband, but not to Ed, not to my knowledge.
Right.
And this is another text that came in from one of our viewers. That's really a good question. This is bringing things down to real humanity a little bit. The security services and the police, like the ones that roughed you up in Greece, do they really know who they're guarding, or are they completely oblivious to what's going on in the conference?
Really interesting was in Spain what happened with the police, because a few days before they had to stand in a long line around, a kilometre cordon away from this luxury hotel. They were out on the streets marching about their pay.
Okay.
So
the police were.
Yeah, and so the Spanish activists were very good at talking to them about, this is a bit weird. These are the guys that are screwing you, and you're here, and we're sort of on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
And there was actually and I think this was a sort of myth, a legend that sprung from this kind of exchange of views with the police, was that one of the police took his hat off and turned and joined the throng of protesters. And I'm not sure that happened, but it's symbolic of what did happen, which was a lot of sympathy was expressed by the Spanish police. And for example, there was a couple of guys that got caught in the woods, with a heat seeker helicopter over, and and the police motorbikes and stuff. They got them, took them off to the head of the local police, who sat them down and said, "I'm totally sympathetic towards what you're doing. Off you go." And they went, "Oh, okay, wow, that was a bit." So yes, they're absolutely human being. I don't know whether you will get quite that level of sort of sympathy in Chantilly, Virginia, 15 minutes up the road from the CIA.
I noticed that yesterday the British police were marching on Westminster, and all the police had their caps pulled down. Was that to avoid the CCTV cameras? Or I thought it was bizarre.
A mess.
It was bizarre. Everyone had a baseball cap on, but I didn't see any I didn't see any kettling of the police.
They didn't kettle themselves.
No. So we're gonna do a little look through your Bilderberg family album here.
Okay.
Let's go to image 110. And Charlie, you just walk us through these images as we cue them up. What's going on here?
Okay. Well, that's a nice. This is taken by a guy who he just decided to come along. He's a British guy. Came along and thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do some journalism, because the mainstream news aren't doing their job.
Who's in this picture?
This was at the front. We've got Joseph Ackerman, who's the head of Deutsche Bank.
Okay.
So the guy on the front right, and he is. If you want to start anywhere in Bilderberg, I would highly recommend you just Google Joseph Ackerman. Dr. Joseph Ackerman. He's the head of Deutsche Bank. He's a non-executive director of Shell, and in fact, Shell is very, very heavily represented in Bilderberg. It's probably the largest corporate presence is Shell. You've got,
as is the Dutch elite.
Yeah, well, you've got the Queen Beatrix is
Prince
there,
Bernhard.
Royal Dutch Shell.
Yeah.
Well, Prince Bernhard, God rest his little SS soul.
She's the bicycle queen.
Okay, right.
Beatrice, that's what they call her.
But have a look at the list of people in terms of Shell, and you can pick out the chairman, Jorma Ollila. You've got the deputy chairman, Lord Kerr, K-E-R-R. He's very interesting, Sir John Kerr. So you've got a lot of Shell people. And so Ackerman, he kind of sits across lots of different things. He's on the steering committee, so he's in the kind of inner sanctum of Bilderberg. And he also, to show you the kind of people they are, in terms of their international roles that they play, he's head of the Institute of International Finance, which is the group that was representing the private investors in Greek debt, and they were renegotiating their haircut, kind of the Greek debt. Ackerman is in charge of that negotiation.
He's steering so, the Greek haircut.
Yeah, he couldn't have any more fingers and any more pies if he tried. Okay. So he's a good person to have a look at, and you sort of look at his CV and you go, okay, and I'm starting to get a sense of the kind of people that are that are here and the level that they're operating at, and it's an extremely high level. And you said earlier, what is Bilderberg? And you know, one of the other things I think it is it's kind of where real power just creeps down enough so you can see it, because it's in contact with the rest of the world. You sort of have that. You kind of got the middle managers, the politicians, and they're kind of invited in, and there's and you sort of get just at that moment you sort of see the. I was going to say the tip of the iceberg, but it's kind of upside down. You know,
because they get together. They only get together once a year.
Yeah.
So you have. Is Bill Gates? Has he been to any Bilderbergs to your knowledge?
I don't know, but he's got. You've got Craig Mundy from who's the chief. What is he? He's one of the chief finance officer. No, chief research officer or something of Microsoft. So he's a big Microsoft guy, Craig Mundy, and
pharmaceutical heads. Will they be there?
Oh God, it's 20 questions.
Yeah.
Head of Nestle, he's there. I love him. We've got a lovely photo of him, which unfortunately I haven't given to you. But
Procter & Gamble.
We've got him there with his going off to his helicopter with his shirt open.
Let's look at 103. Cue up 103, and this is from your little snapshot collection.
Yeah, I mean that was in Greece again, and that was when I think this was just as I was about to be arrested. Again, for the sort of 13th time. And,
did you see who was inside this particular limo?
No, we didn't, but you know, you take enough shots of enough limos and occasionally you get lucky.
Yeah.
And you see, so what's interesting about the shots of people in limos is quite often they're kind of cowering down. We've got a wonderful shot of a guy with a copy of the Financial Times, and he's sort of like this.
Yeah,
right?
I remember David Rockefeller at Chantilly, like down here, like this.
And I wrote about this actually in The Guardian. The feeling I get when I see someone, you know, doing this as the car goes past is real, genuine embarrassment on their behalf. I just think, what are you doing, you child?
Yeah.
That is not how an adult enters a building.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
at
like,
least, you know, there's a...
It's like a vampire at sunrise. It's just like...
It's just more like a teenager, a stroppy teenager, like, you know, don't look at me.
Yeah.
And at least there was a weird thing that happened in Sam Ritz, where they all went on a sort of country walk. Not all of them, like a group of them, including like Eric Schmidt from Google and Lord Mandelson. And anyway, they go down the hill, but at least Thomas Enders, for the head of Airbus, has a kind of conversation with some of the activists there.
Let's look at 102. You know, cue up 102. Tell us about this chap.
Now that's Vossa. He's from... I just like this shot because it's slightly embarrassing for him, because he's just quietly adjusting himself in the hotel lobby. And I just like publishing that image wherever I can. It's just, you know, it's amusing.
A moment of vulnerability for the global elite there.
So yeah, I think he's Shell again.
And 101, cue up 101. What's going on here?
Oh yeah, in the middle now. This is Henri de Castries in the middle. He is the new boss of Bilderberg. They've had a kind of it's been a real shake-up for them in the last year. Just after the last conference, Kissinger resigned as kind of the
Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, Henry Kissinger, who managed to go to Spain and be wanted as a war criminal in Spain at the same time, but without being arrested. So, you know, slippery fish.
Pinochet managed the same feat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's kind of stepped down from Bilderberg, and this guy's stepped up, Henri de Castries. And he's an interesting fellow. He is head of AXA Insurance, which is, and I'm going to get this wrong, I apologise, it's something like the 8th biggest company in the world, or something like that. So when people go, are they really big players? And you go, yeah, the head of it is, you know, head of one of the biggest companies in the world. And he's the guy now, the new blood. And there's a lot of new blood. There's like the sort of Facebook crowd.
Yeah, we're gonna on the next segment. We're gonna go into the social network.
Okay, yeah, because they're all
the young Turks of Bilderberg.
The young Turks are definitely they're in, but
so the Council on Foreign Relations and the equivalent of that in the UK is Chatham House.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now these are globalist think tanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do they sit under the Bilderberg Group? Is the Bilderberg kind of like Bilderberg Holding Company (PLC), and its subsidiaries are the Council on Foreign Relations to govern U.S. foreign policy, Chatham House, the British foreign policy, and then you have the RAND Corporation and some of these big think tanks in Washington. How can you describe the Bilderberg Group? Like, What is it in comparison to maybe the business world or the entertainment world? How would you sum it up?
The analogy, because you have to deal in analogies really to give it some kind of a shape, because it's a big and complicated and not very visible thing. It's a bit like touch of the blind men touching the elephant kind of thing. I think it's got a trunk, it's got a, Anyway, the best analogy I've got is that it's the cabinet. It's the cabinet of the world government. So if you think of the British cabinet government.
When you say world government, and some people out there are going to be like, what's he talking about? There is no world government. Just
the way
give me
it functions.
A caveat on that.
The way when I say world government, I would probably have to then say, sorry, I don't really mean world government. I mean kind of the Anglo-Dutch American Empire.
The governing
of the broadly of the West.
The unofficial governing empire.
Yeah.
Not in name but in form.
Yeah.
Okay.
With its history of banking interests and its military industrial, let's call it what Eisenhower, the military-industrial complex, or the prison industrial complex. Some people call it. I like Anglo-Dutch American Empire because I think that gives it a bit of.
That's
I think it's
accurate.
reasonable to give it a bit of history because it is empire, and you can when you're wondering. The news today is, these days you turn on the news and it's empire in action. You're getting to watch an empire, what some would say dying, others would say flexing its muscles.
An old correspondent from the Times Tribune told me once, long before I got into this journalistic game I'm in now, he said, Patrick, don't be fooled. He said, Britain is the brains and America is the muscle. So he said, the agenda comes out of Britain, and the Americans provide the muscle. They provide the military muscle to execute the plan.
Right.
But how it's portrayed in the media is like, London and Washington are at odds about this particular trade agreement or so and so. But really, essentially, that's not the case.
Yeah, and if we look at the history of Bilderberg, it's got its roots in the intelligence community. Talking of intelligence, and it's kind of intelligence meets finance meets military, and all of those things. And if you go back enough and into documents, you can see how it, which I'd happily talk to you a little bit about, because it's something I've been looking at the documents and reading. It's like Alex Jones always says, go back, read the documents, and you can read the documents, and it's all there, and you can see how it was formed, and through its birth, you can kind of get a sense of what it really is and how it operates.
Well, in the next break, we're going to get into Bilderberg technology, who are the technology players there, and especially social media. We're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Twitter, we're going to talk about the Arab Spring and how this fits into the Bilderberg world. Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host, and I'm here today with Charlie Skelton, who's been the Guardian's correspondent for the Bilderberg meetings for the last 3 years. And this is a very rare mantle to have as a journalist because, frankly, no one's been covering it. So we're hoping that some of what we're talking about today and some of the people we're talking about are going to help open and shed light on what is a shadowy cabal, representing a shadowy group of people, meeting in secret, with the lights out, so to speak.
Well, let's call it private,
not
secret.
It's a private meeting, yeah. It's a private meeting for members only.
Yeah.
So I think
Chatham House rules.
Yeah, Chatham House rules, Surrey Golf Club, etc. We've got some texts in from some of our viewers, and some interesting points. Most of them are directed at you, Charlie. Greg from Edinburgh has texted in. He said, I wish more mainstream media employees would come forward and talk about the Bilderberg Group. How do you feel about that as a mainstream media guy?
Right, so that's all I'm about, what he just said there, because I shouldn't be doing this. I'm so far from being a proper journalist. It's not even real.
You got to be writing jokes for Jimmy Carr.
I should be writing bad jokes. Exactly.
For Jimmy Carr, you can't be covering Bilderberg.
Yeah, no, I genuinely shouldn't be. And
where's Robert Fisk? Where are all our Pulitzer Prize laureates? But
I sort of regard myself as a shame on all journalism, the fact that I'm news journalism, the fact that I'm there. And as soon as the BBC and CNN and the Times and the Telegraph and the Washington Post, as soon as they start sending people and setting up a press tent, and I'm going to back off because I've got nothing to be doing there. But what's interesting about about that is this huge news vacuum that's filled by alternative media. And over the last 3 years, I've seen it absolutely explode from barely a dozen people in 2009 through a kind of press office that I helped run in 2010. The press office got bigger, and when I say press office, a kind of hub of alternative media, sharing content, sharing data, sharing networking, and basically doing the job of the mainstream press. I mean, it's unbelievable they have to be doing that.
But between you and Alex Jones, I mean, I think you probably reached millions of people in the last 3 years, and you've helped start the jumpstart the sort of Bilderberg coverage, really. And now some of the mainstream media cannot ignore it. And the U.S., a lot of the major newspapers at least have to at least acknowledge its existence. And Marco Rubio, who is the potentially the favored vice presidential running mate for GOP nominee Mitt Romney, or de facto nominee at this point, Marco Rubio was apparently being talked about by the Bilderbergers as Romney's running mate. So they just give people an idea. They kind of choose, who is going to be in the steering positions in the years to come. But let me just get to queue up 109. Let's talk about the Young Turks, because we talked about that before. The old guard of Bilderberg. Now that is the David Rockefellers. These are the aging, decrepit, dark crystal creatures like Henry Kissinger. Now we're getting into the sexy new media. Facebook, Twitter, Napster. Right there on the top left-hand corner, I think that's Sean Parker from Napster. Now he's also the first president of Facebook. If you saw the movie The Social Network, he was played by Justin Timberlake. He's going to be at Bilderberg. He was recruited by the CIA when he was at 16 years old. When he won the Virginia, he went to Chantilly High School in Virginia, which is a coincidence, and he won the Science Award. Now you've got Peter Thiel down at the bottom there, one of those three faces. Peter Thiel, Clarion Capital, they bankrolled Facebook, PayPal. This guy is...
He's fascinating. He's my favorite of the new guard by a long way.
And was he there last year?
Yeah. And he's on the he's now been promoted. His career's gone up. He's now on the steering group.
Okay.
So he's really in.
He's got a seat at the round table.
Yeah, he's got a seat at the table. Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of like him in a weird way. He's a strange character. He calls himself a libertarian. He's into that whole thing of I'm going to call it. He's got a company called something like Seascape. It's something, if you look him up, you can see where they're trying to create offshore sovereign entities. Okay. So he's an interesting guy. Okay. Yeah. Well, this is the thing with what my brother, who's a social networking entrepreneur in America, he calls them the revenge of the nerds. Yeah. So you have these buffoons from Harvard, computer science graduates, who have come through the economic turnstiles and now come out in real positions of influence and control. They're presiding over Facebook, which by all accounts, on a virtual level, it's a sovereign country. It's got a population, it's got its own currency, it's got its own markets, it's got a social network, divided, subdivided, and subdivided. Well, they were all. I mean, last year you can look at LinkedIn. Reid Hoffman is there. Amazon. You've got Chris Hughes, Facebook. You've got Craig Mundie, who said Microsoft. Eric Schmidt, Google. All the big names are there, and also the head of the NSA. And you get a sense that they're worried about openness, information. There's so much data at the moment. Yeah, it's kind of a wild stallion at the moment. They're trying to keep a noose around. Yeah, they're scared. They're scared to death. I mean, Google's seed funded by NSA and CIA shell companies. So from the get-go, people aren't aware that Google has hands and is occupied and controlled in some key positions on the board and in management by members of the government, essentially, and the funding is coming from those agencies. Well, all Google Maps and stuff, it's all just American military satellites and CIA, whatever, So it's just commercialized retail NSA technology. Yeah. Okay, well, queue up 108, because just to stay topical here, this is a big thing this year for Bilderberg.
Greece. Greece is at the center of the European Union recession. You talked about the haircut before, the collapse of the euro. What the Bilderbergers are frightened of, and this is what I've read through our coverage at Infowars, this fantastic article by Paul Joseph Watson. If you want to know about Bilderberg, go to Infowars.com because we've got, you know, volumes of information. But they're scared to death about Greece mounting an economic comeback if they opt out of the euro. Let's say they go back to the drachma, you know, getting out, once Greece gets out of the euro straitjacket and Greece gets back to what it knows best, which is tourism, olive oil, feta cheese, and smashing plates, that they're going to have this massive resurgence. And then Spain's going to look and say, oh, wait a minute, why are we signing up to 100 years of austerity and getting ourselves strapped down into permanent debt, and Italy and Portugal and Ireland, where the technocrats have now been placed, unelected technocrats, in heads of state positions.
Which has worked really well in Italy for them. I mean, you've got Mario Monti, who's...
Three-card Monty.
Yeah. You know, Bilderberg Steering Committee, now the unelected, you know, PM of Italy. I felt like his appointment was very much them coming out of the shadows. It was like Bilderberg.
Monty's appointment.
Yeah. It was like, okay, here we are. We're just going to do this thing now. Here come the technocrats, and it was Greece.
Because the euro is very, very important for the Bilderbergers, because I think it was Davignon, who was a former Bilderberg head, he bragged about how they hatched the idea of the single currency in 1991, and obviously that was signed into action at the Maastricht Treaty in 1999, but he said this was a Bilderberg, a successful Bilderberg project, so it came out of our meetings and our steering committee, and the euro is the template for a global government. They would like to roll that out, the central banks, to have an African single currency, to have a South American single currency, to have a North American single currency, and an Asian single currency, or a Pacific single currency.
Well, Europe is their baby. I mean, the history of Bilderberg is the history of Europe.
It is,
and it's you can watch it, and right from the very beginning, you've got and this is, I was just grabbed some notes from earlier, which is, if you want to look at the history of Bilderberg, look at a guy called Joseph Rettinger. And he works for the British intelligence in the war. Then in 1946 he addresses Chatham House with he says, I want a new effort in the direction of the unity of Europe. Then the CIA come in, the CIA and the British intelligence, and he's there and he's going out. Then he goes out to America. He meets the Rockefellers, Nelson and David, J.P. Morgan. The bankers come in, Dulles. And you can see this thing gets built together like this, and then they start going, okay, and this kind of political financial intelligence entity starts building Europe. As their some academics of the left, of the British left, say, this is essentially the CIA building a kind of block against communism and going, we need a big old thing to sit here literally between us and the communists. Whether or not that's exactly what it is, but you can watch it right from 1946 through to now. And yeah, absolutely, I think Greece is a big crisis for them.
Financial intelligence, what you just said, that's a really important, because when you have the major power brokers in the world, we're talking about the central banking families and so forth, they speculate. This is how they consolidate power. When you know something's going to happen in advance of it happening, and I'll give you an example, George Soros, very intelligent guy, he didn't get to where he is today without being able to speculate. And what better way to speculate and to know the outcome than to actually have a hand in engineering the outcome. I'm not just talking about knowing if legislation is going to be passed or regulations that you can make millions or billions. I'm talking about the formulation of countries or economic blocks. This is serious stuff.
Absolutely. The biggest lie we've been sold as a civilization for the last 100 years is there's such a thing as free trade, I think.
I agree.
There's a big fat thumb on the scales everywhere.
Yes.
Quite often it's George Soros's, but if it's not his, it's David Rockefeller's. And if it's not his, it's someone else's. And
in India, it's Monsanto.
Yeah, right.
And they've got a fat thumb on the food and commodities markets, and that's why half the country's starving. Yeah. And that's because of the WTO and GATT regulations. Yeah. So they've had to buy in. The Bilderberg franchise in India has had to buy in to the dictates of the WTO.
And if you look at what Bilderberg is, again, in the sense of these technocrats and the way they operate, it's kind of the managerial board of a technocratic class, of a managed, planned economy. And you look at how Europe operates, just look at the size of it as an entity. I'm talking about the Commission, I'm talking about the European think tanks, the universities, the unbelievable size of this thing.
In 20-odd different countries with 20-odd different languages.
Absolutely, and it's about having a planned economy and about having these technocrats manage things. And when you quite often hear people say, well, look, they just let them get on with it. They're just doing their best to keep the show on the road. You know, and I guess that's sort of what they're doing, but I don't believe that, you know, Shell and the head of Barclays and the head of HSBC and the head of Deutsche Bank are all, you know, planning exactly with my best interests as their bottom line.
Yeah.
I think they have other bottom lines.
Yeah, they have other. I think they have their own set of interests and their own vision of the future, which supersedes the pluralistic or the democratic machinations of us, of plebs and serfs.
Yeah, and by the way, if there were no politicians there, and no public officials, and probably no military and stuff, you know, you just think, go and get on with it, go and do what you want, dance naked for 4 weeks around a bonfire and then plan the takeover of the world. But when my Chancellor of the Exchequer is there in an official capacity, he's meant to be representing me, not skulking around in secret behind dark windows.
So quickly, we're just going to go quickly to 107. There's just to wrap things up for this hour. Occupy Bilderberg, okay? Give us a shout out. What is Occupy Bilderberg, and where is Bilderberg this year?
Well, Bilderberg is in Chantilly, Virginia, the end of May, first few days of June, and at the Marriott, in the middle of a complex of arms companies, and just up the road from the CIA. And it's Occupy Bilderberg seems to be really taking off, and it's a kind of an amazing meeting between the alternative media, the Occupy movement, and a kind of an aware, protesting, activist community. And I just think I kind of got high hopes for it. I think it's going to be amazing.
May 31st to June 2nd.
Right, something like that.
Chantilly, Virginia. Alex Jones will be there along with a few thousand people, I would imagine.
I think there is.
You know, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton both left the campaign trail to meet at Chantilly. And left their press corps and everything.
That's a brilliant. That footage is online, and it's very funny.
And that was to decide which one of them was, they had an argument or something about who's going to be president. And of course, Obama is the man now. But Charlie, I just want to thank you for this hour.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine. On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
But he did go to...
Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen, and I'm here with Charlie Skelton from The Guardian and Channel 4, and we are talking about the Bilderberg Group. Shh, because it's a secret and you're not supposed to know. But now we all know what's going on with Bilderberg. We've gone through it in the last hour. So to our viewers online and members on the special live stream, this is The Overdrive, and we're going to get deeper into the Bilderberg Group, and also we're going to get a lot deeper into their agenda, the global agenda, and we're going to also look at some of these texts that have been coming in. I've got one gentleman unnamed. He says, Iceland. He's all, what happened with Iceland with regards to the Bilderberg agenda? The bust has turned into a boom. Now, Iceland is very interesting because I'm looking at the situation in Greece. Greece didn't have the balls to opt out of the euro last year, so they took the haircut. They got in debt, and now they're going to probably fall out of the euro anyway. Now, Iceland's a success story. They turned around. Well, they first put two fingers up to the British banking system and said, well, that's not our debt. They did a kind of a free man on the land thing as a sovereign nation.
Yeah.
It's a success story.
Yeah, and it's not talked about very much.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that don't want it talked about that much because of the way it's worked. But in terms of Greece, I remember very pointedly, I was down at Occupy London, outside St Paul's, there was a meeting going on, and someone came up and spoke, and he worked at a bank, and he said, he came up to the microphone, it's very powerful, he said, I've just seen democracy die today. I work at a bank, and I watch the numbers go down on my screen the whole day, and it was the day that it was around that time that the Greek Prime Minister said we're going to have a referendum on the Greek bailout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
And he was removed. You know, he was removed, and
It's out.
it was like, and you know, a member of the Rockefeller-run Trilateral Commission. Do I mean Trilateral Commission? Which one? One of them.
Former board of directors of the European Central Bank.
Yeah.
Then gets parachuted in.
Yeah, Papandreou, and
Papandreou,
he goes in, and he said, I've watched the banks kind of turn on him, you know, and they could see trouble, and he was just like,
because he wanted a referendum.
Yeah, and they didn't, and so the technocrat gets put in charge.
Luke Skywalker, I call him. Luke Skywalker, yeah.
So, you know,
Super Mario and Luke Skywalker.
You can really see the technocrats coming out of the woodwork at the moment.
Mm. Well, the thing about Greece, that it's absolutely pivotal. I mean, if you look back through history, right, even at the end of the Second World War, at Yalta, the big bargaining chip on the whole chessboard was Greece, all the way back to Yalta. So here we are again in 2012, and Greece is playing a very, very pivotal position in which way destiny might turn for Europe.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, this will be the destiny of the Bilderbergers as well, because the European Union and the single currency is their baby.
Yeah, yeah.
That's been their baby from the beginning. So how this goes feathers out with Greece.
They may just decide to kind of shrink a little to preserve the integrity of their project.
Yeah.
And just go, you know what, we'll come back to Greece in a bit. We'll see what happens.
We got another text from Denise, and she says, do the Bilderbergers control China? Now, this is a good question, because I often thought, are there any Chinese or any Russians present at the Bilderberg meeting? Because they're in a kind of a different country club over there once you get east of the European Union border.
Well, there were a couple of Chinese delegates in 2011 in St. Moritz, which was quite unusual. So, and on the very, very limited agenda that they do publish on their website, when they talked about what they said, look, this is what we discussed this year, and they had conflict areas, demographic challenges, and China. The word China appeared at least in their discussion. I mean, that's about as much information as they share with us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we discussed China. They might as well have said we discussed some things. But yeah, so a couple of the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ying Fu, was there, and she seemed quite jolly in all the photos. I got a little bit of a crush on Ying Fu. I've got to admit it. But you'll see if you look up the pictures from St. Moritz, she's fun.
Have you got a website that you put any of your stuff on with?
Well, it's all on all the stuff on the Guardian.
It's on the
you can
Guardian.
Just look at it.
Just do Bilderberg, Charlie Skelton.
Yeah, and there's
It'll all come up
reams
online.
of stuff that I've churned out.
I think it's really interesting because you have the BRICS nations now. You know, Russia, China, India, South Africa, Brazil. You know, this new sort of bloc forming, and the difference between the BRICS countries and the Anglo-American empire is the BRICS countries actually manufacture things. Okay, the manufacturing from North America, United States, has been offshored for the most part to China, Indonesia, and a few banana republics in the southern hemisphere. Now Brazil has the largest. General Motors has migrated to Brazil. It's one of the largest auto exporters in the world, oil producers, minerals, you name it, gold, lithium, etc. And China, rare earths, they control 90% of the world's rare earths. And Russia is now the #1 producer of oil on the planet. They just surpassed Saudi Arabia last year.
Really?
Okay, so the BRICS countries, and South Africa is also the deal maker for Africa. They're the most dominant political country on the continent. So in that BRICS, and India, another billion people and a huge workforce. In the BRICS, if the BRICS could start their own Bilderberg Group, I mean, do they have their own Bilderberg Steering Committee?
Well,
their own version of the Bilderberg Group?
They do have the Trilateral Commission is the kind of American-Asian sort of branch of, you know, sister of Bilderberg, where Bilderberg sits, you know, around the kind of Anglo-Dutch sort of area of the globe. That sits further over, you know, the American East. So yeah,
there's a big new Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter, Henry Kissinger was a trilateralist as well.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting organization.
There's so much stuff to get your head around. I just have to go, okay, look, do you know what? There's enough just in Bilderberg. You know, and then you talk about the Council on Foreign Relations. You talk about the European Council on Foreign Relations.
Oh, they have the European.
Yeah. It's just that makes interesting reading. There's so many of these things. They're so busy. I hate to use the word they, but within this group of, let's call them the technocrat class, whatever you want to call them, the managers of the world planned economy, they just constantly getting together, putting steering committee after steering committee with project after plan after...
Busy steering.
I know. I wish they did. You know, everyone says, oh, they're just out playing golf. I wish they were.
Yeah.
I wish they just played golf.
Yeah.
I think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. Now let's get to our man Obama. I just got back from the States. I did a investigation on his birth certificate and his social security number, which I did a great report with Infowars, had Dr. Jerome Corsi and some of these great guys in there. Now Obama, how's this worked out for the Bilderbergers? Because I am under the opinion that Obama has done a brilliant job for his bosses in 4 years. He's fast-tracked things on the agenda that George W. Bush couldn't have dreamed of getting across that quickly.
I guess if you were to put it under the heading of broadly police state, that's where I'd see one of the strengths of that administration and of personal data and that kind of the building up of this extraordinary machine of kind of data gathering and data sharing and data analysis and profiling and all of that. Using the internet as this huge tool, and you know, we talked a bit about the kind of internet generation of young Turks who are now being coaxed into Bilderberg, and you know, that's why, because there's this massive tool of you know, whatever I don't know what you call the internet, you know, but you know, one of the things it is it's a massive data mining exercise.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else, you know, it's also a great thing for sharing stuff like we're talking about. You know, fantastic for that. But it's also gives this it's a profiling tool as well.
Yeah.
You know, we must be these dreadful little blips on their chart,
Yeah.
as would be everyone watching. You're all a blip.
We're part of a pie segment.
Yeah.
On there.
And so, I think they're happy with the way this is, you know, coming along. It's coming along apace.
Obama, I think the establishment has a lot invested in Obama and a lot of political capital invested in Obama. He was groomed out of college. He worked for Henry Kissinger. He Zbigniew Brzezinski. He has very, very much CIA pedigree within his family, and maybe that's the reason why all his college and university records are frozen. That was his first executive order he signed when he got into office, was the sealing of all his personal records, and he has spent millions, I think as $4 or $7 million from Coey Perkins, a law firm in Seattle, to basically in court to give him the right to freeze all his college records, transcripts, student loans, applications, grades. We don't even know if he went to class. So a lot of this came out in this investigation. I did it with Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Phoenix. We did the film with Infowars, but again, a lot of people who haven't been privy to this material would never connect someone like Obama with the Bilderberg Group, because he's come from the streets of Chicago, apparently, and that's the media narrative that they've fashioned around this guy. But yet he's got a seat at the table at Bilderberg. At least he was there in 2008, right?
Yeah, well, and you've got, yeah, absolutely, and you've got, you can see the first job, you know, Kissinger Associates, and you know, you've got Henry Kissinger there with his, you know, bony hand on his shoulder, sort of steering him along, and I find it remarkable, and you know, not many years ago I was one of the people that would have thought this, where you buy into the narrative of this guy just coming up and somehow managing to, you know...
The underdog.
You know, amazing how he just come through, this almost like champion lawyer kind of civil rights. He's being reinvented now as a civil rights activist, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently, he was a constitutional
Yeah.
law teacher. Although I find that
Yeah,
hard to
I guess
believe.
he knows his enemy.
Okay, now I'm going to moving on swiftly to the Occupy movement.
Right.
Okay, that's where I first met you down at Occupy London, and the Occupy movement. Where does this sit? Because I believe that the Occupy movement, and I said this on U.S. radio about a month ago. I was asked about the Occupy movement. I said I support the Occupy movement 120%, but I wish it would grow a brain.
Yeah.
And the Occupy movement really, if it's to be successful, it needs to challenge the true engine of poverty in our society, in this country. And I'm talking about the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the central banking, which controls inflation, which makes you and me poorer each week.
Yeah.
And allows us not to be able to save any money, not to have any real liquidity, not to move up or, do the things that we would like to do, because it would always be the law of diminishing returns. So if the Occupy movement could somehow face off with the central banking system, would they be more effective, or the Bilderberg Group, for instance?
These are conversations which are, I'm not hugely involved with Occupy London, but I am a bit. I occasionally go along to their economics working group, which is fun and full of intelligent people talking about exactly what you're talking about. And I think that it is groping its way towards these deeper problems. Genuinely.
They were at the Bank of England
absolutely.
3 days ago, I believe, yeah?
And,
I was very
they made a statement
to see that. I thought, wow,
they made a statement
good job.
about when they announced that a former, I'm going to get this wrong again, probably, but a former managing director of Goldman Sachs or something had been put forward as a possible new head of
Lloyd Blankfein?
I don't think so, but new to replace Mervyn King at the Bank of England.
Okay.
And the Occupy put out a statement saying, this would be a disaster, because they get it. Occupy does understand that Goldman Sachs is a monstrous entity in the world. It is the giant squid, and it was very heartening to see that statement coming out of Occupy. And one problem I had with Occupy
instead of just the 99% versus the 1%,
which is wrong.
But focusing.
But they've started changing their numbers. Occupy has now started saying the 0.001%, and now they're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the 0.001%, it's meaningful.
Yes.
The 1% isn't meaningful.
No.
So it's just a nonsense statistic. If you look at the numbers in the world.
It's a Saul Alinsky slogan.
Yeah.
Of to divide and conquer.
But the 0.001 or 0.0001 or however you want to express it, then you're going, okay, fine. That's where the chart of wealth goes whoop, up at that point.
And it's a more intelligent analysis of the society. Instead, it is 0.01%. That the concentration of wealth is such.
Yeah, absolutely. And once they're talking in those terms, then they can start talking about the influence of Goldman Sachs. They can start talking about the influence of Bilderberg. They can see Mario Monti. They can see Greece, what's happening there.
They can see the technocrat.
Yeah, they can
what is
see
the technocrat? They know who it is.
They get that. They're big on Occupy is big on democracy. It's big on direct participatory democracy. They like to feel engaged in the democratic process. And Bilderberg is the exact opposite of everything they stand for, actually. And they kind of, I feel like they're getting that. And suddenly we've got this phrase "Occupy Bilderberg," which is, going to manifest itself in Chantilly, Virginia, in some form, I'm sure. And with those two words coming together, "Occupy Bilderberg," that's a very new and exciting phrase.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
you wouldn't have thought that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
They would have got that far.
So yeah, I'm very excited about that, and I think it's a big step forward for activism generally.
I think that would be funny if they actually managed to occupy Bilderberg. That would be great. That happened. Well, I'll tell you a little story about the Copenhagen Climate Summit in 2009. But yeah, they tried to occupy that.
Okay.
We're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back with you in a few seconds. We're going to go into a little more detail about some of the things we've just been talking about. So we'll see you in a second.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine. On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
Welcome back to On the Edge, and we are in our second hour of Overdrive. We're here with Charlie Skelton. We're talking about the Bilderberg Group, and we're also kind of talking about now the Occupy movement. And I've got some interesting text messages from some of our listeners. One of them is from Ian, and he says, is capitalism failing? And this is an excellent question, because I hear this all the time. And I hear this on the U.S. media, and I hear this from the Occupy movement and the protests on the streets. Capitalism is failing, and so we need to get rid of capitalism, and we need to replace it with something else, communism, which is kind of what's inferred. What about this? I hear this all the time. You've seen loads of it.
Well, my answer to this is always simply look at what's happening to the wealth that's just over the last 4 years. There's been a huge transfer of wealth and resources into the hands of the bankers. These bailouts are
trickle up economics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just like with the gun at the back of their head, they've been handing money to the bankers. And, and Bilderberg is one of its things. It's a collection of very, very powerful bankers. Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Barclays, they're all there. Mm-hmm. And they're making out like bandits. It's not it's a massive success story. It looks a bit creaky, and it's a bit edgy at times. What's being, the world financial system at the moment. But actually, in terms of where the money's going, and it's working just great. It's a huge success story.
The door might be a bit creaky, but the engine's running fine.
Oh yeah.
With regards to their system at the moment.
I think so. I mean, what do I know?
See, the Greek, how I would say the Greek haircut, the Greek bailout. This is basically how it works. I'm the European Central Bank, and I am basically a consortium of a group of banks. We'll call them Deutsche Bank. We'll call it Lazard, Societe Generale. Bank of Zurich. Okay, you're Greece, so you need a bailout because you can't pay your bills, you can't pay your public servants, you can't pay your salaries, your transport is not running, so I'm going to give you a bailout. This is the loan. Here you go, Greece. That's it. I'm giving you all that money. I'm such a nice guy. Okay, but you're going to give that back to me because you already owe me compound interest running all the way back to 1960. And plus all the new stuff that I've given you, I'm going to take that right back. And that money is just going to be circulated. In fact, I could do better in the long run and actually take more liquidity back off you in terms of state assets. Your national gold mine, your water system, your electric grid. I'll have all that.
So on one level it's money laundering. They're just washing money through sovereign nations. On another level it's asset stripping. And
that's the big part. The asset stripping is the big part. Because that's the real wealth.
Well, I remember hearing, I was in the car and I was listening to Resonance FM, which I sometimes do to listen to their strange things they put on. And Max Kaiser was on there, the economist, and he was in Athens. And he was there and he saw the big vulture fund kind of asset stripper bankers, literally saw them there in Athens whilst people were throwing stones up one end of the street and tear gas was being fired. They were there just carving it up. And absolutely, we started to see now, today and yesterday, that, vulture funds, we're getting that's started to be mentioned around Greece. They're just going to pick it over its bones, Yeah,
it's a really interesting, there's a very, you've probably seen the film by, I believe it's Richard Curtis, The Power of Nightmares. He's a Channel 4. Adam Curtis. The Power of Nightmares, everybody knows that. But he made another film in 1998 called The Mayfair Set.
Right.
And this was about Tiny Rowland and Walker and Sir James Goldsmith. These were the original corporate raiders, the original junk bond, the purveyors of the American junk bond collapse in the 80s. And they basically invented, put game theory into the markets. Because before that, if you owned stock in the markets, it wasn't something that was sort of gambled on a daily basis. It was like you had stock in IBM or you had stock in British Steel, that was worth something, and that stayed in the family holdings. You might sell off a few shares, but then this Walker was the accountant from Surrey who became the richest man in England in a matter of a decade, and working with Goldsmith, and they were just basically, taking over companies, hostile takeovers, but it was based on game theory. And from then on, the markets had its own intelligence, and it's whatever the market wanted, or whatever the market made. And so now we're in that paradigm. We're in the next generation of that paradigm now in 2000, where the system is done feeding. There's no more wealth or value really in the stock market. So all that's left to feed on, they've done Africa, they've done South America, they've done as much as they can in Asia. Now the system is feeding on itself. Is that a fair analysis of where we're at now?
I think, well, it's, these are obviously huge problems that we're having to describe using, almost mythic terms.
It's like the album Pop is eating, or that group Pop is eating itself. It's sort of like the banking system's kind of now just kind of feeding. It's got,
Well, Adam Curtis is interesting. You mentioned him. If you look at what he talks about in his movies, he's on the right track.
He's on the right track.
Yeah, and I think, and I haven't even seen this yet, but do you know what? I'm going to go and watch it. I think his last thing has been on think tanks and foundations.
Okay.
And once you're into think tanks and foundations, you're getting closer, and you're getting closer to
you're getting the source.
Yeah.
The source of public policy.
Yeah. And you can see the think tanks in the history of Bilderberg. They're very powerful. The Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation. We've got the Hudson Institute, and one of the big players in Bilderberg is the wife of, I'm sure she'd love to be described as this, the wife of Henry Kravis, who's the head of KKR, a big American investment fund. And but she's much more powerful than he is, and you can actually watch this in the images how powerful she is. And
have we got I think we got a picture of her. Q105.
No, I think that might be.
Is that?
No, that's the Queen of. That's Queen Beatrix.
That's Queen Beatrix.
On the right there. Yeah, that is the.
And she's a regular at the Bilderberg meetings,
it's
right?
It's kind of Beatrix's thing. She sort of. It's her and Rockefeller and.
That's her annual bake sale for the New World Order, isn't it?
Yeah,
she's there with the brownies, Kool-Aid.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people wonder why. Why is the Queen of Spain there? Why is the Queen of Holland there? Why is royalty there? And it is a slightly odd question. Some people think it's so that they can have these levels of security. It's just handy to have a queen around because it means you can pump everything up.
Yeah.
You can have the navy there.
Well, that's a good point.
And it's for it is. There's a lot of old, big money and ownership in people like Queen Beatrix.
In the royal family.
Royal Dutch Shell.
Yeah.
Her relationship to that company isn't exactly straightforward, but
she's probably a big shareholder. I would imagine.
Some people say yes, a very big shareholder in that.
Or a bondholder.
Do you know what?
And this is another thing. There's a difference between shareholders, like you and I can buy shares. We can be a shareholder in a bank or a company, but then there's the bondholder. And this is like the bondholder of the Bank of England. I would like to know who this family is or who this individual or individuals are. The bondholders are the ones that own the bank.
Yeah.
They're not just the shareholders. So I think I would venture to guess that there's a few bondholders at the Bilderberg meetings.
Yeah, and well, interestingly, you mentioned that one of the things that Occupy London has been talking about is transparency of the Bank of England, and it's a not particularly transparent entity. It's probably slightly more transparent than the Federal Reserve, but it's
a private bank, right?
Well,
it is on record. It's a number of official admissions have confirmed, and it used to be, I believe, on their website that it was a privately owned bank. It is not a state bank, right?
Well, I'm going to pass on this one because it's a tricky one, and there's all kind of different opinions on it. But anyway, it's good to know that Occupy London, at least it's got that on their on their radar as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But something we were going to talk about Occupy is the fact that they're actually what is quite a political self-awareness there of the danger of co-option. I mean, you spoke at Occupy at St Paul's on that subject.
And I wrote an article in the Guardian about that, yeah.
And which is very important, because a movement like Occupy, which can be steered and co-opted and infiltrated and has been, and I've seen it myself firsthand, it has to be self-aware. And that's the only guard you have against co-option is to be self-aware. And absolutely assume that whatever room you're in,
always.
And it's a bit like Occupy Bilderberg. You know that if it gets big enough, there'll be troublemakers put in, and there'll be
provocateurs.
There'll be agents provocateurs. But the thing about Bilderberg, and this is why it's an extraordinary event in terms of the people around it, they are hugely switched on, the people there, and they are the
high level of political awareness.
Very high level, the highest level of political awareness I've encountered. I get to spend a week every year with people that know their stuff. Right, and it's great, and you just sit. It's like being in a warm bath of information, and you just go, "Oh my God, thank God, these people. At least someone knows what's going on." Anyway, but good luck trying to get away with agent provocateur stuff outside Bilderberg, because everyone there is going to be completely waiting for it.
They'll be able to spot the federal
everyone
agent.
They'll just step away, going, "Look, come on, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
Anyway, but one of the things that Occupy London did was to say. There was a very strong attempt to co-opt it by the Socialist Worker Party and the hard left of British politics. And they said, we're not going to have that. Take down your banners, take your placards, take your flags. We're not political. Get off our forecourt kind of thing. And they did that, and it was a very powerful thing they did. And they kind of beat away the co-option of the left, because in its way, Occupy is trying not to be left or right, in the same way that, anyone talking about anything we're talking about now, if you look at Bilderberg, it's so beyond left and right. The idea that, it doesn't matter who's there.
If you accept the reality of Bilderberg, it means that you basically reject the false left-right paradigm
completely
that our rulers or our society has fed us, which is basically in this country, in Britain, and in America, it's the same thing. So you have the Democrats and then you have the Republicans. In Britain, you have Labour and you have Conservative. Well, in Britain, Labour is Chelsea and Conservative is Man United, okay? And basically, it doesn't matter who wins the league title. As long as the stadiums are full, people are buying the jerseys, and the television ratings are high, the owners of the league then don't care who wins. And basically Man United and Chelsea are allowed to fight over the scraps, which are basically jobs for life, government contracts, good CV positions for their so that once they're in government, they can then sit on the board of directors of numerous different companies. But over the owners of the league, I could say Bilderberg represents the owners of the league. In that sense.
Yeah, so, you've got around the same table. You've got, not that people of different political persuasion shouldn't talk. Obviously, they should talk. And there's, and people with different worldviews. Of course, should be around a table. But when you've got Peter Mandelson and from the British left, and George Osborne and Cameron from the right, and Tony Blair over here, and further back you've got Dennis Healey, and you've got it doesn't matter left right doesn't they're just
Margaret Thatcher said it herself. My greatest achievement is New Labour. 10 years of New Labour, advanced conservative policies and privatization efforts that she couldn't have achieved during her time.
Was she?
So the Tony Blairs of the world, the Peter Mandelson of the world, are in the Bilderberg Group. Mandelson's a globalist operator. Tony Blair and Associates now, essentially a globalist deal-making holding company whose bills are being paid by the UN.
But you look at Tony Blair these days. He gave evidence at the whatever it was, Chilcot.
My favorite person. He's my favorite guy in the world, by the way.
He's terrifying.
He's my favorite person in the world, Tony Blair. I've got a poster of him in my bedroom. I don't know. I'm just sick of seeing these people that they're not really
you feel like you want to go like that in front of their face and go, are you genuinely with me here? You're not. There's an amazing book called by a Jewish scholar called Martin Buber called I and Thou, in which he analyzes human relations on the most primal level, and he calls it this I-thou relationship of two people together being in communication, addressing themselves towards it, and you have someone like Tony Blair, and I remember I saw David Cameron before he was leader, I think even leader of the Conservative Party, did a speech. I was with a friend of mine, and we came away going, he's not really. That wasn't a real person, was it? Yeah. And I've got some other friends who met David Miliband in the park. I won't say who they are, but they met him in the park, had a chat, and they came away afterwards and said, it was weird. He didn't respond he sort of like he failed the Turing test.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you feel like you want to hit them prod them with a fork to at least make them respond in a human fashion.
I'm going to have to agree with you, because I was misfortunate or fortunate enough to have met Tony Blair, John Major, and Margaret Thatcher. But the one that left the most limp-wristed, literally limp-wristed, handshake, everything impression was Tony Blair. Fake smile and everything. And I just felt like it was pointless to meet him, or even for the few seconds we met and shook hands. This was in Downing Street's back garden. Right. And I thought, what was the point of that, Well,
at least Thatcher, to her credit, whatever you say about Thatcher, there is the story that she went to Bilderberg and then just came away and went, you know what, I'm not that into giving up British sovereignty.
Yeah, and I half believe that would be the case.
But, take that with a bucket of salt. But,
sure.
But
John Major, he's board of directors of the Carlyle Group.
Yeah.
Which
you got to love the Carlyle Group.
The Carlyle Group is a major player on the global scene. They've also made some major media acquisitions. There's a lot of news.
Bush Senior, I think, is Carlyle Group.
Bush Senior is one of the founders of the Carlyle Group. Yeah, so they're in the mix there. But anyway, we'll talk about some of these things when we come back from break. And when we come back from break, we're also going to look through some of these text messages that have come in from some of our viewers who've raised a lot of interesting points. So just wait for us, and we'll see you in a second.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine. On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
We are back on the Edge. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. I'd like to thank our online stream and our members for tuning in to this second hour of Overdrive. We've had a fantastic discussion with my guest, Charlie Skelton, who's the Guardian correspondent for the Bilderberg for the last 3 years. But first, let's get to some of our listeners' text messages. I've got Dan from Leeds. He's asked, what do the Bilderbergers actually do? You said who they are, where they meet, what do they actually do? I've got Linda from Birmingham saying, is there any connection between the Bilderberg Group and Bohemian Grove? We'll get into that. And then I've got Denise again saying, are there any arms manufacturers who are represented at the Bilderberg Group? I'm sure there are. I know General Electric is one of those attendees. But let's talk to Charlie about that. Again, let's address Dan from Leeds' question. In a nutshell, what do the Bilderbergers actually do?
Well, I think the easiest answer to that is what they do and have done and are trying to keep on doing is the biggest political experiment of our time and arguably of all time, which is Europe, the European Union. It is a huge entity. That's what they do. They do Europe. I mean, if you look back at if you look back at their past and look at the guy Joseph Rettinger who set them up, he in 1948 became the Secretary General of the European Movement. The European Movement was funded by the CIA through a body called the American Committee for a United Europe, and you have the Alan Dulles in charge of that, and the CIA there, and you have the express desire in all of these bodies around in the early 50s, late 40s. All of these bodies sprang up to try and create Europe. There was always, there's all the different acronyms, different names, but you have this direct pump of cash from the British and American military intelligence establishment to keep this to make this thing happen.
During the
And you've got-
Marshall Plan years.
Yeah, and it is the European movement. The European movement it predates Bilderberg, and Bilderberg is a sort of a flowering of that. And it's lots of things. There's some people argue that it's kind of it's a little bit Nazi, and it's
Well,
and
with
it's
the declassified documents were declassified British documents. I believe it was last year. It was serialized in a few of the major newspapers in this country. That at the end of the Second World War, the German elite got together before Berlin fell and drew up their idea or their philosophy, their second Plan B, if it were, for a Fourth Reich, which would be a European Union. Okay, and that's mainstream news. I'm not.
Plan B for Bilderberg.
Yeah, Plan B for Bilderberg. And where does the name Bilderberg come from? Explain a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it's just a name they've got from the first sort of, I think it was 1954 or something like that, the first kind of proper conference they held. I mean, there were a few dribs and drabs in the early 50s before that, but the first kind of like Bilderberg conference was at the Hotel Bilderberg or whatever it is in Holland. And,
Holland. Is it still there? Is the hotel still there?
Yeah, it is.
I wouldn't mind going there for a weekend.
It looks pretty cool, right? Yeah, maybe that's a
we can have a little
lost weekend there.
A retreat of all the great minds in the alternative media can meet at the Bilderberg Hotel next year. I don't know who's going to pay for that. That's the only problem. Bilderberg, Linda from Birmingham, she wanted to know, is there any connection with Bilderberg and Bohemian Grove? My initial instinct is, yes, of course there is, because obviously some of the same people who belong to the Bohemian Grove, if you're not familiar with the Bohemian Grove, Alex Jones exposed that and made it kind of a public piece of knowledge by sneaking in and filming all these men like Henry Kissinger and the head of Sun Microsystems and the Bill Gateses of the world and the Wall Street power magnates running around shouting in the woods, burning owls.
The way that I distinguish it, though, is it's American. It's the kind of, as you say, the Wall Street skull and bonesy kind of crowd.
It's like the fraternity
it's
initiation.
Absolutely.
For older,
and they go camping, and God only knows what goes on in the woods.
Yeah, who knows?
Bilderberg is much more serious than that. It's a conference. As I said before, it's the lanyards. They've got their agenda. They have speakers, keynote speakers. They have breakout groups. It's a proper 3-day serious conference.
And then feedback on the last day. Feedback what they had in discussion groups and breakout groups, and feeding into the formation of a new agenda. And there's some consensus reached as well the last day on the agenda, or something or other.
They would deny that fact. But also throughout the year, the steering group meets as well, which is the Bilderberg Group website takes great pains to say this conference is the only thing that the Bilderberg Group does. It's not. The steering committee meets. You can see there's released documents that just show them meeting other times of the year.
That's where the leak about the U.S. presidential candidate Mark Rubio came out.
Right.
Was out of a steering committee meeting, I believe.
Right. So what was the question? It's a very different thing to Bohemian Grove. There's obviously overlap, but I kind of prefer talking about Bilderberg because when you're starting to talk about Bohemian Grove, you're talking about people dancing around a big burning owl and mock child sacrifice, and you're going, okay, look, that's a little bit off the chart. Even though it's there's photographs. I'd much prefer talking about this meeting where they just sit down and sit down like this around a big table going,
Well, frankly, there's a lot more information about Bilderberg available.
And it's a political event. I like talking about it as a political, as a summit. I call it, and I think people should call it a summit because that's what it is. It's a political summit, and
which should be on the public radar.
It should be on the public radar, and it's a travesty of news journalism that it's not.
A big deal's made about the military-industrial complex, about arms manufacturers. Are these types of companies represented at Bilderberg? Certainly General Electric, I have seen GE names on there, and that's one of the biggest defense contractors in the world. Also one of the biggest media owners in the world is General Electric.
Okay,
so they're a big player. Now, the military-industrial complex,
the military itself is transforming. There's new technologies that have come online that they've gone beta tested in places like Iraq. I'm talking about drones, and I'm talking about drones being used for civilian control of domestic extremists or population crowd control or whatnot. I saw the factory in Arizona when I was there. It's a massive operation, and thousands of jobs, and you know, they beta test these things overseas in places like Pakistan and Afghanistan, and then lo and behold, you're sitting in the park and you see this thing flying over your head in America, and it's being commandeered and used by the local sheriff's department or the Department of Homeland Security, and we're not far off that in this country, in the UK.
This is so depressing. This subject is actually too depressing to talk about.
I don't want to get into the police state, but it is funny. It is funny.
In terms of the person asked about the arms companies this year in Chantilly, Virginia, if you look at it on, you might as well use a bit of CIA technology and look at it on Google Maps, and it's the Marriott Hotel is just literally surrounded by Boeing.
Oh, just
you know, all the arms bell
dotted all around the hotel.
Yeah, Grumman or whatever it is, you know, I can't remember.
Interesting.
But just all around are the arms companies, just in a circle. So it's, I would expect them to be, I mean, they're pretty much in it already. I'd expect them to be present this year.
Because they're a big driver of Bilderberg policy. You know, oil companies, arms manufacturers, they do drive events in the world.
Yeah, and they sort of become the same thing once you're talking about the big banks, the big investment banks, and you know, and they're sort of the same thing.
They're the majority shareholders of all these corporations anyway.
Yeah. So
you're really talking about one.
Once you're talking about the chairman of HSBC and the Marcus Aegis, the head of Barclays and stuff,
Lockheed Martin, it's the same thing.
They're just owners and shop salesmen and you know, etc. So it's the military, or the American intelligence often crops up, and like I was saying last year, the head of the NSA, this guy, General Keith Alexander, who's the head of the NSA, head of US Cybercom. It's a nice
Cybercom.
And
interesting.
So I think he gave a sort of keynote speech. Why do I think that? Maybe I just made that up. But
what has Cybercom got planned for us?
Yeah, well,
in 2013.
Well, you know, when Cybercom, the head of the NSA, is talking to the head of Facebook and the head of Google, I just get kind of cold chills.
You don't get a warm fuzzy feeling.
I don't get a warm. This is the thing, and I do come back to this. Is the number of times I speak to people about this, and they go, they're just having a meeting, and you know, they're just trying to. You know, they're just trying to make the world a better place. I mean, genuinely, they're just trying to. Okay, what the chairman of Shell is? I mean, you know, don't tell me that Shell are in this world to improve it. Anyway, etc. etc. So I don't want to get, you know, that's
you and your bloody conspiracy theories.
Well, the great thing about Bilderberg is in terms of conspiracy theories, it's simply not one. It's been put. It's been put in the wrong drawer.
It's conspiracy fact.
It's just a bit of history combined with a bit of politics.
Sure, by definition, it's a conspiracy. You have multiple people, multiple groups steering an agenda in private, in a clandestine manner, to achieve a certain result. That by definition is a conspiracy. But it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. And I hope that a lot of the watchers of this show, On the Edge, are conspiracy factualists. There's a big difference from theorists. So I personally don't...
I thought you were going to say conspiracy fascists.
Fascists. We've got a few of those, actually. I've got a few of those coming in on the text. But look, I'm a conspiracy fact guy. I don't believe in conspiracy theory. There's nothing more boring in the world for me than conspiracy theory. I'm interested in conspiracy fact. I like to write about these things. I like to research about these things.
I love that. The great thing about Bilderberg is there's so many documents. There's release documents, there's cabinet papers, there's memoirs.
To know Bilderberg is to know history.
Of the last 60 years, absolutely.
It's to know history.
Yeah.
So certainly I didn't hear about it in high school in America. I went to the University of California. I never heard of Bilderberg. Obviously, this was in the late 80s. And what would the world be like today if in your history book curriculum, there's a chapter in world history, 20th, 21st century, 20th century, of Bilderberg for the 17-year-olds to get their teeth into before they get into university. How would the world look?
Do you know what? I'd love to. I went to the. What did I go to? There was a thing at Earl's Court about the design show at Earl's Court. And a guy there was talking about kitchens, and he said he's really pushing this. He's a guy called Johnny Gray, and he makes kitchens, and he loves kitchens, and he's now setting up a course on kitchen design at a university because he wants it to be taken up by the world of academia, and he's helped this course come into existence. I would love a university to call a course something like parapolitics or deep politics or something like that. And you know, you'd have to go back to Plato. You have to talk about the Republic. You have to talk about how elitism works. How you have to talk about eugenics. I mean, sometimes someone like Alex Jones will just be shouting into the microphone, "It's all eugenics," and you know, at our level, it is. You know, but you know, you'd have to do a bit of the British eugenics crowd who are kind of they really are fascists. The Darwins, the Huxleys, and these sort of people. What's the guy? I've forgotten Bertrand Russell. There's a friend of Darwin. I can't. Oh, well, yeah, with the heads, the Eugenics Society stuff is terrifying. Well, Harvard's got Harvard's got a course called Understanding Obama. Really? Okay, imagine the most expensive university in America. They've now got a course called Understanding Obama. Okay, and this is what you pay, $60,000 a year in tuition to be able to take a course like that. Why not a Bilderberg course? You've got all the best minds in politics, best minds in economics. They're all there at Harvard. Why not a Bilderberg course? Well, I think Bilderberg would be half a term or something, you know, because it's not a lot. You could maybe specialise it, you know, do a couple of weeks on it. Yeah. But anyway, it's fascinating, and I'm sure that people watching this do like trawling through PDFs of old documents. And there's going to be more information this year than ever before. So if you want to book a flight to Washington, D.C., Chantilly, Virginia is just a little hop, skip, and a jump over the Chesapeake Bay, and bang, you're in Virginia. You'll be there with Alex Jones and all the rest of the Occupy Bilderbergers who are allegedly threatening to show up and crash the party this year. So that would be a nice vacation for the husband and wife if you want to go see America. Otherwise, you can follow this madcap international globalist escapade online, either at Infowars.com or here on The Edge. We might actually do a wrap-up show of the Bilderberg meeting, maybe sometime in June or July, and that would be great to talk to you, maybe show some video footage. We might get Alex Jones on. I might be able to Skype from my Washington jail cell. Or from, they might let you have a Skype call from your Washington jail cell. I think so. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is serious stuff. You know, and there will be some heavy-handed police tactics there. I'm sure there's going to be people arrested. I hope it's not Alex and his crew. But I assume with this much attention on Bilderberg that we're going to have a law enforcement presence there. Well, I hope we have a mainstream media presence, but more important than anything else, let's get some newspapers and some TV crews down there. Yeah, let's get someone from the Telegraph, who's a new watchdog paper apparently, and the Times or the Guardian. You're there, independent. But hey, be good if there's a media partner. The BBC, we pay our license fee. Maybe the BBC could. Yeah, the BBC could pop down. They could. They've got the budget to send a crew down there, and they've got all the best kit. But anyway, thanks for joining us on The Edge tonight. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. It's been really great. Thanks for your text messages. Thanks to Charlie Skelton from The Guardian. And let's keep an eye on the Bilderbergers this year. I'll see you next week.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.